Cronulla Beach can have its share of windy, overcast days, but 120 years ago, this usually picturesque slice of Sydney's shoreline was the scene of an extraordinarily violent storm that spelled the end for this coal-laden cargo ship, the SS Nemesis. It was one of Australia's most infamous disasters at sea.
The storm that caused the sinking was a violent gale, and it was actually the loss of the ship that gave its name to the Nemesis gale. It was almost a typhoon, and the poor crew were out at sea, had left Newcastle on a voyage to Melbourne. They had nowhere to go except to battle into these mountainous green seas.
The demise of the Nemesis killed everyone on board, 31 men and a woman working as the ship's stewardess.
Everybody was killed. It was a disaster, a catastrophe on a huge scale. The incident was so dramatic and the storm so intense that the loss of the Nemesis attracted Australian media. The story was in the papers for a month, every single day almost. It gripped the nation, and certainly for the families of those involved, it was a horrible ordeal as they waited and waited for any news of their loved ones.
99-year-old Esther Field's grandfather, Alexander Lusher, was the captain that went down with the ship.
My grandfather had taken this ship after he had resigned, but they asked him could he come back and do one last trip.
And he just wanted to retire and go home. And so he actually said to the company, well, I'll do it for you, but I get to handpick the crew to do it. And so the tragedy of it is that he's not only lost his own life, but he lost the lives of all his mates.
Although debris and some bodies did eventually wash up onto shore, the location of the Nemesis wreck became one of Australia's most curious maritime mysteries. Tim Smith and Brad Duncan from Heritage New South Wales have been hoping for years it would be solved.
Because people saw it from the Cronulla direction, but people also saw something happening from the Wollongong, Stanwell Park direction. So very hard at night, far offshore to actually pinpoint where the ship was.
And when did it sink? How quickly did it go down? Did it go down straight away? Did it, was it pummeled to pieces? Did it go down in one piece? It's all part of the jigsaw, isn't it?
Queensland-based underwater drone expert Ed Corder makes a living from finding valuable items that have fallen off ships.
We were working on a project off the coast of Wollongong, and we're actually looking for containers that had fallen off a ship.
But this project uncovered something out of the ordinary.
I got a call at about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning from one of our techies who was on the job. And he said to me, look, I've got some information here that you want to look at. This is quite interesting. So when the information came through, I didn't give it too much thought because it looked a bit like a debris field.
Despite his scepticism, Ed decided earlier this year to pour some of his own money into further research, taking these images of the discovery.
We spent about $20,000 to get the vessel, get an ROV crew, which took about 24 hours because it's in a very difficult location.
It could only be Nemesis, and finally, after decades of people searching for this wreck, we had confirmation.
Hardly ever you could say you'd stumble upon a wreck as significant as this, and it's just the whole story's brought a lot of joy to everybody.
The National Science Research Organisation, CSIRO, has since further explored the wreck, and it's been confirmed that it is indeed the ill-fated Nemesis, over 100 metres below the surface.
It's been a story where people have never known where the Nemesis have ended up, so it's a big part of maritime history. A lot of divers have been looking for the Nemesis over the years, but the story's huge for the families.
And finding the families connected to those on board has been the next mystery in the Nemesis story. In particular, the descendants of the captain, Alexander Lusher.
Captain Lusher from the UK was 48 years of age at the time of the loss of the ship. He was a well-respected ship's captain. They were working men doing a very dangerous job way out at sea in a hostile environment, and this was their last trip.
So it'd only be 4 years.
Esther Field and her sister Rhoda learned of the discovery while watching the news. The story of the Nemesis is family folklore.
My grandmother went to the door to see who was there, and this is what the story goes. She saw an apparition of her husband, and he said, "Are you ready, Em?" And she said, "But what about the children?" "Oh yes, the children." And it disappeared. So because my mother told me that, I think it happened.
Several other families have since come forward, with the discovery providing some clarity for families.
They're compelling stories, and I think the mystery of these incidents still resonates today, and having the shipwreck found gives an opportunity for families to get that closure and get that connection to their own personal family story.
We had never imagined we would ever hear anything concrete about the Nemesis, 1904. So it has been quite exciting.